Right, we're live now.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Leeds District Consultation Subcommittee. I'll go through the agenda as standard. For those who aren't regular attendees, the first item we've got is the open forum, which we always put before all the business for anyone to raise, any members to raise any issues regarding public transport, walking and cycling around the Leeds area. We had there was no interest submitted in advance, but I always do allow any members of the committee or any member of the public who's in attendance to raise any issues for this. So did anyone have anything they wanted to raise at this particular moment to either officers of the combined authority, or we've got the operators here to respond directly if there's anything?
Chair, I have something to raise if I can do that now.
Yes, Clive, go ahead.
So my name's Clive Woods. I'm chair of the Airborough Civic Society, and at the moment we have a consultation on about a park and ride at Leeds Bradford Airport and a station, of course. Now, normally one would be in great favour of transport improvements, but once you look at the detail of this, I'm afraid many local residents, including Leeds Civic Trust and other transport bodies, feel that £42 million estimate, and it'll be more than that, of course, on a park and ride station at the airport is a poor way of spending funds. Why the concerns? Well, I think it's going to be 300 cars, and that will have very little effect on congestion. I mean, it's about 6 buses actually, and it's going to cost 42 million. And unfortunately, our local experience at Appley Bridge Park and Ride, which is always full up from 8 AM and of no use at all if you go any later, bears that out. So a station at the airport sounds a good idea, but it won't be like Manchester, where you arrive off the train in the airport, you arrive at the station and you wait for the shuttle bus, and that will add another 10 minutes or so to your journey time. So what's the situation now? Well, getting to the airport is actually very good. The current bus services are excellent. They can take under 30 minutes, whether it's from Leeds, Bradford, Harrogate. So it's only the congestion on the way that spoils things, and you can deal with that much more cheaply. So, park and ride. Well, park and ride, as I said, at Appley Bridge is full by 8 o'clock. So who's it going to be used for? Well, I fear it will be used by commuters from Harrogate area. Why? To save money on fares. And there are stations at Wheaton, Pannell and Harrogate, but the fare differences are massive. From Horsforth, your season ticket costs, annual one, £640. Just go over the border to Wheaton and it's over £1,200. And if you go to Harrogate, or you're travelling from Harrogate into Leeds, £1,700. Well, you can imagine that it's very tempting for people living near those stations to drive through Poole up to the airport and get free parking and get a cheap fare. So that is a real problem. I mean, the return day fare on the train is £4.30 compared to £6 by the bus to the airport. Now, should we be spending £42 million of West Yorkshire and Leeds money to benefit Harrogate commuters and give them subsidised fares? Now, even worse, these cars that will come from that area will add to the congestion and shocking pollution, particularly in Poole in Wharfdale, which suffers terrifically at the moment. Now, since 2008, our Civic Society has been campaigning for bus priority on the A65 and the A658 to reduce car use, congestion and pollution by making buses quicker and more reliable. We've always been told there's no money, and all the time congestion's got worse and journey times for buses have increased by up to 1/3 for some of the day. Now, with £42 million, we could get bus priority from the Horsforth roundabout to Rawdon and near the airport, where the bad congestion is, a fraction of the cost. It would benefit local people as well. It would benefit the airport buses, of course. It will cut bus journey times, and people actually might be tempted back on the buses, because most people around here, unfortunately, choose the car. So that's the way we would like to see the money spent. And a lot of it, of course, because it wouldn't cost so much, could be spent in other parts of the city rather than being spent on this, what should I call it? It's a project that sounds good, but will not actually give good value for money. So I'm sorry that was a bit long, Chair, but I mean, I just go back to Upperley Bridge Station, 300 cars, always full, cost, how many million was it? I think it was 5 million, and I worked it out at £26,000 per car parking space. And I just think that is awful in the current climate, but also for those people who don't use cars. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Clive. That's fine. You weren't too long. At 5 minutes, I would have asked if you could start ending it up, but that's fine. We didn't obviously know necessarily that you'd be raising it at this meeting. So what I will do is see if any officers at the Combined Authority or officers from Leeds want to come back with anything directly. Otherwise, we can always come back with a written response. But
Peter, these points were raised in 2016 at the consultation, but they were never answered, which is disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that'd like to come in on that point? Yeah, Helen, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Clive, for bringing that to us. I think obviously there has recently been various consultations and discussions around the airport. I think what I would do is I would welcome kind of those comments coming to us kind of written so that we can look at the case in a wider context, if that's okay. Unless Paul Foster would like to come in now as well.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, thanks, Clive. I think points you made are well made. Clearly, we would like to prioritise buses more in the Airborough area, and I think hopefully maybe some of the government announcements today are things that could help us bring those types of measures forward. I think the case has been made for the station, not just as a park and ride station, but to support the employment uses in the area, as well as the airport. So there's a multitude of rationale around it, but I do understand your points around potential users of that car park and how we can do other things with buses to support the area.
Thanks for that. Can I ask then that we take note of the points obviously Clive's made, and then prepare a response to go back as soon as possible, and then based on that response, Clive, obviously more than happy to continue the discussions and see what other points we can raise, and any other questions you raise coming back on that. If it's something that needs discussion, then maybe we can bring it up at the next meeting as well. We can bring some more information back on that, if members would like more information on that. Was there anyone else that had anything to raise in terms of the open forum? I'm not. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Howard. Thank you.
At a previous meeting, I raised a question about the new bus shelters on New Station Street by the station. I felt that they seemed to be very small for the volume of passengers, more like you would expect in a suburban area. But I guess it was too late because they'd already been installed. Looking at the plans I've seen for the Corn Exchange area, it seemed that to look as though similar small bus shelters were being planned there as well. And that's also an area where I think there'll be a large number of people waiting for buses. So I'm wondering if the plans for the bus shelters there could be looked at again to review whether they're adequate.
Thank you, Howard. Good point raised there. I wonder whether I don't know, Helen, if you want to come in on that, or obviously Paul Foster's on the call, who may be able to help as well as an officer from Leeds.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's a helpful comment to note. And we will take that back and just look at the plans for the Corn Exchange and understand what shelters are going on in there. We have obviously been through consultation on this, but I just want to understand kind of what they look like in relative to what else has been delivered.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I don't know, Paul, did you want to add anything to that, or we can come back and look at those?
I think appreciate Howard's point. I think the shelters that we are using are ones that we've been looking at elsewhere across the city at high frequency stops, such as the Hedgerow as well, and Park Row, where schemes are going in there at the moment. So they seem to be what we've been asked to specify, but we can obviously look at that. There is constraints obviously for space and balancing that between the footways, crossings, etc. And there's a cluster of stops together there. So yeah, but we can take it back, and hopefully the frequency of the buses means you don't have to wait as long for them.
Thanks, Paul. Let's take that back then. It sounds like I don't know what's happening here. It sounds like a conversation I'll have to have between the combined authority and Leeds there, just to check on those specifications. So thank you. I don't know what's happening with the screen sharing there. Are we able to?
I've switched it off. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just limit that to a couple of people if that's okay. I was going to say as well, there was a little bit of background noise. I don't know if it was in somebody's background, because obviously we're at home and I've got my own children and other people making noise in the background. But if anyone is attending and isn't muted, if you don't mind muting just while people are talking, that would be appreciated. I think I didn't see any other expressions come up for the open forum, so I think in the interest of getting to the main business, we'll leave that there if that's okay, and move on. So now we go on to the standard business. So did we have any apologies for absence from the standard members today?
Yes, we've received apologies from Council Groves, Louise Ebbs, Alex Hornby, Brandon Jones, Tom Bridge, Rannick Stevenson and Brittany Stead.
Okay, thank you. And do we have, obviously, we've got some of those are representatives from the operators. Do we have somebody else standing in place for those? Do we know? We'll find out at operator updates, I guess, when we get there. If nobody wants to shout out, we'll know. So moving on, so obviously I pointed out earlier, we've widened this meeting to allow elected members at Leeds to have a chance to hear the workshop around the connectivity strategy, the connectivity plan, and then so we have got a wider set of people with us today. I'll open up for declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest. That's normally just to the members of the Transport Committee, but I'm aware members of Leeds may want to raise anything if there's anything that might affect their comments. So does anyone want to declare anything at this point? I'm not seeing anything, so we'll move on. As far as I know, we haven't got any exempt information today. I think that's the case. Yeah, so within the pack, you obviously had the minutes of the meeting held on 12th of October. What we'll do is, in the interest of speed, ask if there's any clarifications anyone wants to make on those. We'll accept that people have read them, or if there's any matters arising anyone wants to raise from those minutes. Can't see anything, so if we're happy to take those as read, many thanks. So we'll move on. Next item is normally chair's update, but I don't really intend, as we've got so many people here, and I think that they're mainly here to attend for the workshop, I don't intend to say much today for that. So just for people who don't normally attend this meeting, welcome to the Leeds District Consultation Subcommittee. They're twice yearly meetings that public representatives and operators can come and have discussions about issues around public transport, walking and cycling across the Leeds district, and similar meetings are obviously held in the other districts of the combined authority. And I'm here as chair of the Leeds District Consultation Subcommittee as a member of the Transport Committee, and then we've got other members of the Transport Committee here, as well as our public representatives, and for this meeting widened out. So I think we'll move to the information report. So item 7, each of the meetings will get an information report that just highlights some of the updates for public transport, walking and cycling around the Leeds district. What we normally do is take that as read, so don't necessarily go through it at length. So am I okay to ask if anyone has any points they wanted to raise from that information report? Les, yes, I can see your hand up.
Yeah, just on the appendix, Chairman, the list of ongoing projects. People in Headingley have been a bit disappointed that the traffic signal adjustments, which were promised some time ago and actually listed here as being ongoing, haven't actually happened. They sort of began to happen, but they seem to have ground to a halt. Can anybody comment on that? I mean, what is the position on that now?
That's obviously a Leeds specific scheme, so I guess I don't know whether Paul, if you're able to comment on that, or is that something we'll have to come back on?
I think we'll have to come back on. I don't know the absolute detail on that. I know that the programs of both the A660 and the A65 have been ongoing this year, but I haven't got the program dates or detail.
Yeah, Paul, it's the A660 one that's in particular.
Thanks. Well, I think we'll have to come back to you on that if that's okay, Les. But we'll
thank you. Yeah,
come back to you with a written response as to that. Paul, if you could note that down, because I think we're probably best coming back from Leeds with that specific response on the scheme. Thank you. Any other points anyone wanted to raise from that information report? No. Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else. So I think we'll move on now to operator updates. So this allows us a time for the bus and rail operators to give any updates they wish to around their work around the Leeds district. So can I ask Helen, would you mind taking us through those if you can?
That's no problem. Should we do the bus one first then? So Stuart Fillingham, I think I can see.
Yes, can you hear me? Oh,
yes,
good. Okay. From First Bus perspective, our communications continue to follow government guidance to ensure that our services remain safe and customers can travel with confidence, as do our enhanced cleaning and social distancing regimes. Service levels have adapted in line with DfT guidance and support. Most recently, last week, we did a ramp up in service, which takes us across West Yorkshire to approximately 95% of our pre-COVID mileage. This has been received fairly well from customers so far, with a number of duplicate journeys operating to ensure school and college children are carried safely and with requisite amount of social distancing. Those journeys are reviewed every day, and the interventions are made to ensure that we can continue to carry people with that level of confidence. We've been working closely with partners as city infrastructure works have evolved, such as the two-way configuration of Vicar Lane. Our passenger numbers were roughly 45% of where we were last year at the moment. We're also working with our partners at Leeds City Council and the Alliance for communications regarding passenger recovery campaigns in line with the relaxation of lockdown measures, which will no doubt be coming hopefully very shortly. Longer term, we're making plans for what the network looks like post lockdown and the roadmap. I'm also planning for certain park and ride. The vehicles have been ordered from ADL, and we're looking forward to receiving them and operating the new site. So that's it from us at the moment. Nothing else to report at this stage.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on those. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next update. No, if you want to move on, Helen, thanks.
That's fine. So Dwayne Wells, Arriva.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Dwayne. I'm head of commercial for Arriva Yorkshire. I'm joined on the call today by Kim Purcell, who's our head of operations. Our timetables were reduced in February in response to requests from the DfT to reduce mileage in line with the national lockdown. And we've since restored our Monday to Friday service to 100% of pre-pandemic levels, so particularly catering around school movements in particular. We are still, of course, running with reduced capacity for social distancing, and as a result, we've got some extra journeys out there as well for the school market in particular. Like many industries, we have suffered from some COVID-related staff absence, but we are fully staffed to deliver our registered services. Saturday services are still reduced. They're operating a Sunday frequency in the main, but a normal Saturday span a day. It is our plan that come 12th of April, when social distancing, when non-essential retail hopefully opens, that we would resume our full 100% Saturday service at that point. Looking forward to welcoming customers back on board, but for now we'll continue to cater for all those essential journeys, and that's the update from Arriva.
Thanks, Dwayne. Any questions on that? I didn't see any hands go up in the middle, and I will say, sorry, I should have said at the beginning, if you can use the raise hand function, because obviously with so many people I can't see all the people on one screen, so can't see anything, so moving on. Thanks.
I can't see anybody as a replacement for Alex Hornby. I'm
here, Ben Mansfield.
Oh, sorry, Ben, I missed you. Sorry.
I've got my camera off. So it's very similar to Stuart and Dwayne. We've continued with our guidance, following government guidance. We've got service changes planned in April and in May and June, again following lockdown restrictions easing. Obviously our school bus services have gone back across the region, but other than that, we're still planning very much for the future and seeing if the network is going to be required to adapt across the coming months.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions for the Transdev update? I'm not seeing anything, so we'll I think we're on to trains then, are we, Helen, now?
Yep. Do you want to go first, Graham?
That's great, thank you, Helen. Probably the update from us is in line with our bus colleagues. There's a lot of work on continuing the reassurance, so as people either return to work with children going back to school, or in the months ahead as we anticipate restrictions to be relaxed. We're aware that a number of people probably haven't travelled with us for over a year, so it's reintroduction back to the services, confidence in travel, and reassurance messages will be vital in that area. In terms of the number of services we run frequency, on the 29th of March for the weekday, we will be returning to the timetable we had in operation at the December 2020 timetable change, which is roughly around about, I think it's 85-90% of our normal services before we entered into the current lockdown period and timetable operating then. That will mean that we will essentially move into the same timetable as we go into the May 21 timetable change as per the requirements of the Department for Transport to essentially roll over the timetable as was in December 2020. In terms of station developments, for those who travel to and from Leeds into Dewsbury, we will be starting work in May on the co-funded installation of toilets and changing place facility and additional waiting shelter at that station, work starting in May and concluding at some point over the summer period, and a good customer enhancement for that station. And looking ahead, as we go into the spring into summer months and also into the autumn, we will be working closely with a range of organisations, including WICR, on meeting the needs of customer demand as they come back, essentially in 4 different areas: leisure travel, which we do forecast to be fairly significant as people look to reconnect, business travel, which we do anticipate will be limited, and essentially providing the response to the new commuter and how people adapt and come back to work, probably in a limited number of days of weeks or even during the month. So that's the core update for us as TransPennine, and if there's any queries, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions for TransPennine on that update? Can't see any, so if we move on, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So Pete.
Hello, everyone. Pete Myers from Northern. We're currently sitting at a patronage of about 15% of what we would have seen. You used to be able to say this time last year, but this time last year we were in COVID, so pre-COVID. And our timetable will carry on pretty much as it is now until the uplift, which we'll see in May this year, when we will build a timetable very much designed around what research shows us is likely to be the demand for this year, which will see probably a big uplift in leisure travel. So we're making sure.
I'm waiting at the moment, but I'm having a problem. So yeah, I thought I would phone you back. Okay, then to that.
So we will do our level best to make sure we meet that demand. As with everybody else, we have had issues with COVID absences, and the clinically extremely vulnerable are still away from work, which is an issue, although that is one shortly to come to an end. Our main issue this year has been the lack of training. We haven't been able to train new train drivers because although the classrooms opened in the middle of last year, there comes a point in every driver's life when they've actually got to drive the train. And we tend to do that with someone else in the cab for obvious reasons. And that's been impossible. But we're now in a position where that can happen, and it is happening. But that legacy, if you like, the lack of training will be with us for a while, and will mean our timetables for a while will be resource-led and continue to be. So we do need to take that into consideration. But our timetable in May is a good timetable. We're back up above 90% of what we would previously have delivered. A lot more during the periods, the peak periods, or when peak demand is likely to be. We'll also work. We've done a lot of work with West Yorkshire recently with the schools going back, and we're supplementing with buses there to make sure the young people can get home. And as essential retail comes back, we'll have to be fleet of foot there to make sure the demands into the city are met, especially on a weekend. But that is the situation for Northern at the moment. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions for Northern on that update? No, we'll carry on then. So thank you all operators for those updates. There's obviously planning ahead on moving back to some kind of normal or new normal. I'm assuming then that it'll be quite a moving feast as we go back, because we're trying to work out how people's behaviour may change, how people may behave as things start opening up, and there'll be a lot of movement. So obviously, if all operators could keep as many people as updated as they can on that, and I'm sure officers of the Combined Authority will as well. So we'll move on then to our main item for today, really, which is the workshop session on the connectivity infrastructure plan. So we've got a presentation that will be taken through, probably maximum of about half an hour, just to go through the whole connectivity infrastructure plan for Leeds, and then we'll open up for questions after that. If anyone does have any questions while we're speaking, if they want to use the chat function to put those in, then it may be that obviously the officers that are presenting may be able to pick them up as we go and answer them as we go through the presentation. Otherwise, we'll take obviously any questions and comments from everyone afterwards. So Helen and Tom, can I pass over to you to take us through? Hopefully everyone can see the screen there.
We can see your screen, Tom.
Hello, my name is Tom Gifford from West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I'm delighted to see you all today and to be able to talk you through the West Yorkshire Connectivity Infrastructure Plan. As the Chair quite rightly highlighted, we've got a number of slides to talk you through around the plan, and it's fantastic to have you all on the call today to be able to talk you through it. What Helen and I will do is, we've got about 20 odd slides to talk through, and the slides we'll make available afterwards on the website as well. So don't feel like you have to take notes going through. All of the material we'll be talking through today is available on the Combined Authority website, and this specific slide deck we will put on the web as well, so you can all view it at your own leisure as well. And the most important point I really want to get across today is that there is now an engagement taking place on the West Yorkshire Connectivity Plan, and we really want your feedback. So today is kind of an opportunity to share what the plan looks like, the scope of it. If you do have questions, please try and post them in the chat function, and as we're doing the Q&A at the end, we'll try and pick those up. And if there are any questions in the Q&A time, then obviously please do raise your hand, and we can have a discussion around it. I think we've got until 4ish today to try and get through any questions, and obviously there's more time for questions afterwards. I'll come back to that during the slides. And on the screen in front of you, you should have the web link for where we are hosting all the material on the Your Voice page, and the Twitter handle as well. So as we're going through, feel free to take a look at that page, and we can discuss through the questions as well. So in terms of what we're going to do is a little bit around the overview of the Combined Authority, just one slide just to remind everyone what the Combined Authority's role is, and then get into the infrastructure plan, and particularly the mass transit vision, and then also get into what it means for each area of the region, particularly focusing on Leeds today, and then next steps. So that's the plan, and as I said, this is a really important opportunity to discuss your views on the plan, and more than happy to arrange follow-up conversations as well as needed. And as I said at the beginning, the slides will be made available on the website afterwards, so that anyone who needs them can have them. So let me move on in that case. So West Yorkshire is an economy in its own right of about £55 billion, bigger than many EU countries, about 2.3 million people living in West Yorkshire, and employs 1.1 million people across over 90,000 businesses. So it's a big deal, West Yorkshire. It's a real hive to a diverse kind of economy, and it's absolutely essential that we work with government to support the recovery post-COVID. West Yorkshire's got a number of really big universities and colleges. We are the largest regional finance centre, as well as having more manufacturing jobs than anywhere else in the north. And I think that size and scale is significant. And obviously, as you will be aware as well, we're heading towards local elections, and in particular, a mayor coming into post in early May for West Yorkshire. And so that will also increase our kind of say with central government, and hopefully increase funding opportunities for delivering some of our ambitions for the region moving forward. So what does West Yorkshire Combined Authority do? Well, obviously we have a big role around transport, and that's part of why we're here today under the Metro banner, but we also do a lot of other things as well around delivery of major schemes across both transport and broader kind of other sectors as well. We're the accountable body for the Leeds City Region Enterprise Partnership, and we also do a lot of work in the business growth area, supporting businesses, investment, employment hubs, skills programs and the like, as well as trade investment services. So obviously that area's been really busy through the COVID pandemic, as you can imagine. And we also do a lot of work around adult education budgets, which is worth £63 million a year. So the Combined Authority covers a broad areas, or a number of broad and really significant areas, of which transport is one of those key areas. So jumping into today's slides and what we're going to focus on, let me just start by kind of talking a little bit around the connectivity plan and what its main priorities are. So we published in January the West Yorkshire Connectivity Infrastructure Plan. And this is the first time as a region we've brought together a spatial plan for infrastructure for the region as a whole. And it's a really bold and ambitious plan which covers a range of different modes across bus, rail, walking, cycling, mass transit, future mobility. And it's built up from a range of different evidence sources. And on the website, we've published much of the evidence base, which has gone into the plans as well. All the material I'm going to be talking through today is available on the website. And so you can access it all. There's a number of report documents, as well as a survey to complete, as well as a number of polls we've been running on Twitter as well. Hashtag WY Future Transport. Please do take part. There are some more of those coming up over the next few days as well. So the connectivity plan and the case for mass transit are really focused on public good, people and prosperity, and they're really built up from evidence, focusing on those communities of greatest economic need, the key employment and housing growth centres, and the transport and environmental constraints across our region. The maps, which I'm going to show you, which are published as part of the plans, bring together for the first time some of the key evidence base into a single picture for the region. This is a really bold ambition for future generations, and it is significant in its ambition, and it's also a draft. So it's draft because we want your views on it, and through the engagement we want to listen to everyone's perspective so that we can improve these plans. So if there are areas where we need to refocus, absolutely, let's understand where they are through this engagement so that we can then finalise the documentation. So the plan is focused on three big issues: COVID and the recovery from it, the need to connect everywhere, and the need to connect everywhere from an inclusive growth and productivity perspective, and also the climate emergency. And as a region, we have the target to be net carbon zero by 2038, with significant progress by 2030. And we've done a significant piece of work looking at the climate emergency and the targets and what it means for different sectors. And what's clear from that work is that transport is the biggest emitting sector of carbon emissions in West Yorkshire, and within that, the private car is a significant player in terms of its role in terms of carbon emissions in West Yorkshire. So if we are to address carbon emissions, we need to address the car travel to a degree, but also we need to provide a quality, sustainable alternative to the car, so that there is that alternative which people are willing to use to make their journeys moving forwards. And the other thing is that all of those three big challenges need to be tackled concurrently, so together. So we can't just focus on one of them, we need to address all of them at the same time. Now, as I said before, the connectivity plan is built from evidence, and this is the first of a number of maps which I'm going to bring up on the screen today, which show some of that evidence and how it comes together. And what this shows is, for the first time, across West Yorkshire, stitching together all of the local plans across West Yorkshire, the areas of housing growth, employment growth, as well as those areas experiencing deprivation in our region, so we have a single picture of what the future looks like. And what you can see on this chart is how those different areas kind of join up, and what's really important is what's transport's role in joining up those places moving forwards. Because I'm sure you're all aware that when designing a transport system for a region, it's really important that we understand the function of places now and into the future, because those functions will then determine what types of modes, what types of technologies are right into the future. And this is the same material, but just zoomed in at a more granular level, so you can particularly focus on Leeds. And again, this material is all in the plan, and it's all built from the local plans up. So understanding what the local housing and employment growth plans are. And it's worth noting at this point that it is recognised that the housing plans and employment plans in Leeds and the local plan have evolved in the timescales of the connectivity plan being published, and there is a constant evolution, and we will kind of reflect and revise the plan to reflect any changes which come through the local plans into intermediate period ahead of the connectivity plan being finalised later this year. So I just at this point. But you can see here those growth areas within Leeds, the key spatial priority areas within the city. So you've got spatial priority areas towards East Leeds around the airport, as well as towards East Leeds as well. So the connectivity plan is has 6 key priorities. It's got that walking and cycling will become the first choice for short journeys. The bus being at the heart of our plans with networks revitalised post-COVID. Rail serving trips to our main centres. A new form of mass transit to provide the missing link in our transport system. Cars and vans still being important, but just being used less. And this comes back to the point I was making earlier around climate emergency and the like. And the need to reduce our carbon emissions. And finally, it's got to focus on international connectivity, particularly in a post-Brexit world. The plan also includes a series of intercity priorities. So this is how we connect West Yorkshire to the wider north and as well as to the south. So this highlights the need for investment in Trans-Pennine route upgrade, in full, as well as enhancing the East Coast Main Line and electrification of the Calder Valley Line. It also highlights the need for Northern Powerhouse Rail and its connectivity, particularly to Bradford and Leeds city centres, as well as High Speed 2 East, and continuing to make the case for that investment in HS2 to Leeds Centre. And what this map does is it brings together for the first time how the evidence around those key growth centres comes together as an overall vision for the region. And this is really the centre of the conversation today, is have we identified the right modes for the right places? Have we identified how they come together in the right way? And that's really what we want your feedback through the engagement. So what we do here is, based on all the evidence around transport constraints, environmental constraints, the growth ambitions, the areas in most need of economic support, we highlight here the types of modes across mass transit, rail, local rail, bus and cycling, of how those modes then come together on a single vision for West Yorkshire as a whole. So it's a real kind of step change from where we've been before. It's also recognised that this is the start of the process, not the end of it. This is this sets the shape of the future rather than kind of defining it too prescriptively, because it gives space for us to continue to evolve these plans as funding programs become available. And I think funding programs is a really important point, which I'll come back to in a little bit, because actually when making the case for funding particular schemes, it's really important to understand how they fit within the broader framework of the proposals for the region and the ambitions of the region. And what the connectivity plan does is it helps to set that framework for what we're trying to achieve as a region. And then when funding becomes available from individual funding streams, we can then start to tell that story of why that particular investment is important. So that kind of sets the scene for the connectivity plan. And then what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes on mass transit, and then I'll come back to some of the other modes and what it means for Leeds. So turning to mass transit, we published as part of the connectivity plan, the West Yorkshire Mass Transit Vision 2040. And this document sets out a bold ambition to make West Yorkshire greener, more inclusive and better connected. The vision is on the website and we really do want your feedback on it. The case for mass transit focuses on how a low carbon system can support the recovery from COVID, support the transition to a net zero carbon economy and provide seamless integration between the modes and support communities across the region. Mass transit linked to cycling, walking, bus and rail is integral to our vision for a sustainable public transport system fit for the 21st century. The vision document illustrates the corridors within West Yorkshire where the evidence suggests there is the greatest potential case for mass transit to be delivered. This map is the first time as a region we have highlighted that integration between the modes and where mass transit can play a role in filling the gaps in our transport network. As part of the engagement, which is now open, we're asking you, have we identified the right places to connect by mass transit? Do you agree with the vision? And what do we mean by mass transit? Well, in this slide here, what we do is we highlight the short list of potential technologies. And the case will build on the worldwide market testing into transit technologies, which we held last year, and where we spoke to 120 suppliers, manufacturers and operators of mass transit systems across the world, UK, Europe, China and beyond. It highlights the need for a blend of advanced innovative technologies, such as new bus rapid transit technologies, new light rail technologies, and ultralight rail technologies, which allow us to leapfrog other regions, but still be grounded in deliverable options. So as an example in this, looking at the Birmingham and West Midlands work, their system now has sections which don't require any overhead wires, and the view from industry is that we can go even further than what's been trialled in Birmingham in their city centre by having systems which only require end-to-end wires, or only require wires at end termini locations rather than along the whole route. And obviously that has a massive townscape and visual benefit of not having the streets cluttered with overhead wire kits in sensitive areas of the cities. But also some of the work around ultralight rail technologies. Some people on the call might be aware of the work which is going on in Coventry at the moment in that space for lower demand systems. So where there's the clear need for this type of technology, but also just a lower level of people potentially travelling. So there's a whole blend of different technologies we're looking at. And at this stage, we're not saying it has to be just one of these technologies. It's about the blend of technologies across these 4 areas to create an integrated network. And before jumping to a particular design of a route or a road, we've also proposed a series of design principles. Mass transit will form a new form of transport for West Yorkshire, and it needs to be integrated into the urban fabric of every community it serves. Our design principles are shaped by our goal to create a 21st century transport system, and we're proposing 4 design principles for developing design of mass transit. They are putting people first, our shared environmental responsibility, creating a better connected region, and celebrating the cultural and historic assets of West Yorkshire. And so between them, these will set the foundations for how we would then design the mass transit system for West Yorkshire. So just picking those for a moment, putting people first. Well, this is around making sure stops are accessible to all users, making sure there's multiple doors, inclusive safe spaces around stops. And environmental responsibility is providing that attractive alternative to the car, making sure the infrastructure is resilient to climate change. Better connected is all around integration with different modes. So making sure that mass transit and bus are integrated to share infrastructure where needed and practical to avoid competition between them. And making sure that mass transit is connected and integrated with local rail services. And celebrating West Yorkshire for me is the most important, about the kind of celebration of our natural and built environment and integrating mass transit within it to create a symbol of pride for West Yorkshire. So having a deliverable scheme for phase 1 of mass transit is absolutely essential. And we are acutely aware of the need to learn lessons from the past, while still accelerating delivery and enabling the levelling up of the north. The vision document sets out a roadmap for next steps, and the implications from devolution and the recent budget are things which we are taking into account at the moment. So there's a roadmap in here, but it also sets out some corridors which are more likely to be candidate options for phase 1. And the document also talks to the £4.2 billion intracity transport fund settlement, which was re-announced in the budget last week, where mayoral areas and only mayoral areas are able to bid for a share of the £4.2 billion, particularly for mass transit types of schemes to come forwards. So obviously that is front and centre of working through what that means with government at the moment. So I'm going to spend a bit of time now. We've talked about the mass transit vision. I'm going to move into some of the other modes, and then particularly move into what it means for Leeds. And obviously, we're more than happy to take questions at the end as well around any of this material, because there's an awful lot of new material here to talk through. So the connectivity plan also talks about walking and cycling, and the need for ensuring that by 2040, every neighbourhood, village, town and urban centre should be easy to access and move around as pedestrian or cyclist. And as part of the connectivity plan, we've highlighted a number of places, and it's all linked to our local walking and cycling investment plans. From a bus perspective, the bus is at the heart of our plans, and obviously the national bus strategy has come out today, and we're working already really carefully in partnership with the bus operators, as you will have heard today. And the plans we've outlined on the website as part of the connectivity plan include the strategic bus network review. And we've got, obviously, Helen's leading the work in this space, and she'll be there also to answer any questions around this work as we move forwards. Helen, is there anything you want to say on this slide, or should we just move on and come back to it in questions? And then we've also published a rail vision, which sets out the ambitions and the priorities for the West Yorkshire rail network. And it covers a range of areas across capacity, connectivity, standards and implementation. And it's really the starting point for future plans on more detailed interventions to come forward. And it sets the theme of what we want to achieve with the rail network. So in terms of the connectivity plan, it talks around individual modes, and then what it also does is it then sets priorities across 3 different programs: schemes for delivery by 2025, strategic priorities for development by 2025, and options for delivery thereafter up to 2040. So it's got those 3 different programs, and what I'm planning to do is just talk you through each one of those programs now very quickly, one slide on each, what it means for Leeds. So the starting point for this is around the growth areas, and those areas experiencing deprivation and the areas in need of inclusive growth. And this plan here just re-emphasises those areas within Leeds district across the area. So buses, and this slide here is the first time where we bring out all of those schemes which are currently in development delivery within Leeds district. So these are schemes which are mainly funded either from a West Yorkshire Transport Fund, from the Transforming Cities Fund programme, from the City Connect funding programmes, or another funding programme which we have coming forwards already. So a blend of funding programmes. So what this map and the material here is schemes which are already kind of committed in one form or another, and just drawing them all together to show that overall picture of how they fit together for Leeds. So we've got schemes which are focused on helping people walk and cycle, people to use public transport, and then schemes around improving traffic flow and making better provision for buses, motorcyclists, cyclists and pedestrians. And we've grouped them here. This is a simplification and summary of the material in the connectivity plan, and there's much more detail within the actual plan and its accompanying appendices. So you've got schemes here around improvements to cycling and walking around Putty Link and Green Rothwell, more cycle superhighways, to more use of public transport measures across A651 North, A647 and the like, the demand responsive services in East Leeds, the new rail stations in Fort Park, Leeds, Bradford Airport and White Rose, and as well as providing more car parking spaces at a number of existing railway stations as well. And then in addition, a series of traffic flow measures, particularly in East Leeds and around the Outer Ring Road, as well as at the redevelopment of Leeds City Square. And I think, particularly from a Leeds perspective, it's really important to remember that this is a really important people mover, and the greatest immediate opportunity is to improve journey times and reliability, to build on the current Connecting Leeds programmes by tackling congestion and providing effective bus priorities. I mean, from a rail perspective in Leeds, in and around Leeds Station is crucial, with around 34 million passengers every year going through Leeds station, with 75% of these travelling from outside the city boundaries, with the station approaching pedestrian capacity and also approaching kind of capacity for services to get through the station. Investment is urgently required within the station. And we also need to create new investment, particularly to the east and to the western approaches to the station, to relieve bottlenecks, which are already suppressing local demand and creating big pressures. From a mass transit perspective, and we'll come back onto this, is the corridors for mass transit. Really, there's a corridor to the north, and also corridors to the south as well. And I think, particularly, what does this all mean and how does this come together? What are the regional priorities for connectivity? Well, we've got them across modes on this screen here. So we've got them across each of those modes. And as I was just talking about here, walking and cycling is our priorities are really developing further phases of City Connect programs, creating more neighbourhood improvements for walking and cycling, building more kind of strengthened partnerships with the bus operators, and reviewing the case post-COVID. And those big priorities in the rail space around Transparent Route Upgrade, MPR, and High Speed 2, for example, supported by a clear plan of long-term investment, particularly for the more local services as well. Mass transit, our priorities are really focused on accelerating development of phases 1 and 2 of the low-carbon West Yorkshire mass transit system. Roads, we're really focused on that move to alternative fuels for vehicles, but also maintaining the highway network for all users, and also starting to look at the case for introducing highways demand management to help address the level of trips to help support the climate emergency. So the series of regional priorities are incredibly important in the plan. And this map is, again, just a zoom in of some of the earlier maps we've talked to, and highlights some of those corridors and the modes and what they mean for different corridors, and particularly picking up on the mass transit work. You can see here those corridors to the north, as well as between Leeds and Bradford, towards the south and into the eastern areas around the areas where we think there is the opportunity for mass transit. So I'm coming to the end of my slide, you're pleased to know. And the last slide I just wanted to highlight is we will try and answer as many questions as we can today across as many modes as we can. But I also just wanted to pick up that we do have some more webinars coming up over the next couple of weeks. So if you've got real kind of questions towards the rail space, obviously we'll try and answer those today, but we've got a rail webinar coming up Monday week at 5 p.m. There's a walking and cycling webinar coming up, and as well as a bus one. And then there's a webinar which the date's just about to be confirmed for looking at transport decarbonisation and how do we support the climate emergency. The date's just been confirmed. It's going to be in the same late March window to be confirmed. And if you particularly want to re-watch the webinar we held on mass transit, the link is here as well. And we're likely to have one more event around mass transit coming up very shortly. The link to where you can find out about the events is on the screen as well. Just go to the Your Voice page for connectivity and you'll find the click-through link. Please just look at the invite form via Eventbrite, and we will look forward to seeing you at those events. We'll be bringing specialists from each discipline to those events as well. And that really summarises where we are. So I'm more than happy to take questions at that point. So we've got Helen here as well. I'd like to pass back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Tom. Shall I take us through the comments we've had in the chat first, if that's okay, and I'll go through. So first, noted you said obviously the slides will be available on the web. Are we able to send a copy out to all members of the committee, as well as the elected members at Leeds? I think that'd be really useful, just for those that couldn't attend. Either a copy or the link, I think, would be really useful. The other question on a similar one is Les and there may be others who need a printed copy. Are we able to arrange for any members of the committee who requires a printed copy to get them? Can
I just ask if Government Services are on the call, and whether one of the members of Government Services could just confirm that's okay?
Yeah, we can look into that for you.
Thanks, and I'll confirm both of those afterwards and make sure that we can do that, because I appreciate that both of those would be useful. There was a couple of comments. We did have a bit of echoing during your presentation, Tom. So there may be, for the most part, I think we could get you, but there may be a couple of details people want you to go on. But should we take the questions in the chat first? So if you can see those, we've got one from Richard Isaac around engaging the growing youth population. And then centres outside West Yorkshire, e.g. Harrogate, and how they may connect. And then there's a couple from Councillor Richards and Councillor Harrington regarding Wetherby. If we could take those, and then we'll come on to the next ones, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So just picking up on the question around Harrogate. So absolutely, this is a West Yorkshire plan. So there is a focus on connecting those places within West Yorkshire. And we have had a number of conversations with our colleagues, peers within North Yorkshire County Council, who are the Transport Authority for Harrogate. And it's right that we kind of look to join up those key flows from places like Harrogate, Selby and beyond into West Yorkshire and Leeds. And we do that to a degree, but I think obviously we could do more in the space. Particularly though for this plan, and what we're focusing on here, it's those connections within West Yorkshire, which we have absolutely prioritised, because we think that's been a massive gap in the plans and the thinking to date. But there's more we could do around how we could connect areas like Harrogate. How could the rail service in particular from Harrogate be improved? What's the minimum service frequency we want? To the degree the rail vision document starts to get into that, and we'd really like to know whether that goes far enough from your perspective. And also we've got those bus connections, and particularly towards that area as well, which the bus network review starts to talk to as well, about how do we improve some of the bus services towards Harrogate. There's the other question around from Richard Isaac, and absolutely we're keen to kind of have more conversations with different groups. And if there's a good event which has been held by Calderdale and Mott around the Halifax Gateway, then maybe something we should look to do and replicate. If that'd be helpful, absolutely welcome to do that. We are holding a series of young people's events across West Yorkshire as well. It's as you can expect, it's slightly more difficult to do that in a COVID world, but we will absolutely try to reach as many hard to reach groups as possible through the engagement.
Thanks. Can I just add a quick note in there, adding to Richard Isaac's question around, have we been in touch with the Youth Voice and Influence team at Leeds? Because I know they've done some really good work over bus with us recently, about getting their responses to represent young people's views on the strategy as a whole.
I think we have. My consultation team have told me that we have been in contact with a number of those groups. So I think we have, and if we haven't, we will do so.
Great. If you come back, I'll just take. Obviously, we had the question about Wetherby. If you'd be able to follow that one up, and then there's one from Les on off highway routes, and then Councillor Smith from Pudsey just about a comment about it going through Pudsey. If we could grab those, and then we'll come to the questions from the floor, if that's okay, just to tie them off.
So Wetherby, I think, and we've got Paul Foster, I think, on the call as well. I think we all agree that what shouldn't have happened was in the 1960s, that the Wetherby rail link shouldn't have closed. I think that's the fundamental issue from a Wetherby perspective. It should still be on the heavy rail network, shouldn't it? The challenge is we are where we are. The plan identifies the opportunity for the growth areas across the region, and it identifies the kind of role which bus will play for serving Wetherby into the future. It doesn't identify the case for transit to get to Wetherby. And I think that's an area which, if we've got it wrong, then that's something which we need feedback on, and I welcome receive feedback on. Absolutely, that's the point in engaging on a draft plan, is asking what are the strengths and weaknesses within it. So if there are places which you think should be connected by transit which aren't, then do let us know. But I would add to that as well, the case for transit will be difficult to make for some bits. So when we're talking about a blend of technologies, it's not all going to be a tram. And why do I say that? Well, because building a tram is very expensive, and there needs to be we will only be able to make the economic case where on the particularly high demand corridors. So we need to make sure that the case kind of reflects where there is going to be the demand for using transit as much as anything else. But absolutely, if there's feedback that we need to pick up particular places which have been missed, then let's make sure that is picked up in the responses to the engagement. Off-highway cycle routes are important, I think was the point Leslie Webb has made. Can we talk about this? Yes, absolutely, we can talk about this. So making sure that we've got those off-highway cycle routes is really important, and we need to make sure that we've got kind of segregated cycle infrastructure for as many groups as possible. And I think that's something which the cycling webinar in a week's time is going to get into in more detail, if that's okay. And the Pudsey point, absolutely. The problem with Pudsey is that the rail station isn't really in the community of Pudsey, it's away from it. So it's about how can we kind of use mass transit to help better connect the centre of Pudsey into the rail network, but also into Leeds as well. So there's a real big opportunity here. But what we haven't done at this stage, and it's on purpose, is we haven't identified route options, really just looking at the places to connect by transit and saying, are we connecting the right places? If people say we're looking at the right places in broad sense, and the next stage is to get into route options and how do we actually turn that into a reality? So it's about doing this in stages rather than jumping to the conclusion straight away and giving ourselves that opportunity to test of, have we missed places out, or should we be connecting places differently? I think there's been a number of cases in the past where people have jumped immediately to a solution and a particular road for schemes. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid here, is really listening to people's feedback on the direction at the strategic level before jumping into the detail.
Thanks, Tom. That's useful and useful clarification at that last point. We'll go then to the questions from the floor, shall we say, with people with their hands up. So I'll take them in three. So I've got Councillor Robinson, Councillor Dawson and Councillor Reagan in that order. And then if people want to start raising their hands, I'll try and get them in the right order as they come up, but people do shift around on this. So apologies if I get you in the wrong order. Councillor Robinson, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two quick questions, if that's all right. You mentioned that there haven't been route plans identified, but it would be high demand corridors. Do we have any idea of what the budgets would be like for these high demand corridors? So if you chose tram, if you chose light rail, just to give responses a bit more weight. And the second question is, what is highways demand management schemes?
Thanks. Councillor Dawson, do you want to put yours in, and we'll do them all as a group?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the impacts that the arrival of mass transit will have in the city centre and district centres. Obviously, I think it is welcomed, and we've talked about this for years, but the impact of months and potentially years of disruption to businesses, particularly retail businesses in Leeds city centre and in district centres, how will we ensure that we can overcome that and gain people's trust and support for this scheme, which we know is welcome, but when it comes down to my road being dug up for X number of months, people might then withdraw the support. So will we have measures to bring people on side to work that's necessarily going to be done to make this arrive?
Really good question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, Denise.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Chair, a couple of questions. I represent Birmingham, South Richmond Hill, which is very close to the city centre and has a really busy highway splitting the ward in two, as in the A64. There's parts of the ward, as in Richmond Hill and Cross Green area, that has very, very poor connectivity and has nothing to connect it to transport-wise into the city and into economic developments that are taking place. Yes, I know that there are views there for cycling, walking, but we have to, if we're wanting to get people into an economic area of jobs and welfare, then we have to have that support into those areas. And I think the second question is, how do we use the mass transit and possibly rail? We've got a rail network there in Osmonthorpe you know, and how do we bring that into a possible station area for local people to access?
Shall I work through some of those questions, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah.
So just starting from the top, I've been taking some notes, I've been going through. So in terms of what do I mean by high demand corridors? This is where corridors where there are the most people travelling down them by either bus, rail, walking, cycling, car. And the case for building mass transit will be different depending on whether the solution is a bus solution or an ultralight rail solution or a light rail solution. So because they all cost different amounts of money to invest. So typically the bus solution, a kind of a high quality bus rapid transit type of solution, as has been seen in Belfast, will have a smaller capacity of vehicle. So a bus rapid transit vehicle can carry around about 150 people per vehicle, just to give it some sort of sense. And I think it's important to note in terms of vehicles, the different modes, that we can wrap whatever technology we want around it. So you can call it hydrogen powered or battery powered. But over the last 100 years, probably the capacity of different vehicles hasn't really changed between the different modes. You can a kind of an articulated or big bus vehicle can carry the same number of people now as it did 100 years ago. And the same goes with light rail as well, to a degree, where the vehicle can still carry 200 people. It's just technology you wrap around it. So its ability to use different propulsion systems, its ability to use automated driver technology as well. And I mean, you compare that to a car as well. A car 100 years ago could still carry 5 people. It can still carry 5 people now. So high demand corridors are those ones which would be able to support the case for mass transit. And broadly speaking, and this is very broad, so I'm a bit nervous about putting this out there, but I'll say it anyway. You need a corridor which would support the case for a light rail solution of about 10 million people a year using it. So you need quite a significant high demand number of people travelling on a corridor for there to be a case for a light rail solution, because light rail is a lot more expensive than building a bus rapid transit, and that's because you've got to kind of dig up the roads to a degree to be able to put the infrastructure in, or put it into tunnels if that's the solution which best works for particular areas. So it really does depend. But what I would say in terms of cost is that the cost of some of the technologies has come down quite considerably over the last 10 years. Some of the innovations which the industry has been doing to recognise that it needed to reduce the cost. So some of the innovations around how you put the track in are significantly lower now, and that's being realised in some of the other cities which are investing in this type of technology. In terms of the other point you made around highway demand management, well, this is how do we collectively look at the number of car trips on the network and what policies we could use to achieve this. And different policies might be right for different areas within West Yorkshire. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all. And all we're really seeking to do at the moment is to start that conversation around the fact that we know we need to reduce the number of car trips. There are different options and tools available to us, some of which are more locally driven and some are more nationally driven. So it's about understanding the balance of all the tools available to us and then working through the implications of each one. The impact of arrival of mass transit and the construction impact. There is inevitably a construction impact of investing in the transport network. And we're seeing that already, aren't we, through the transport schemes which are coming forwards, be it the highway schemes, where we're changing road junctions or putting in cycleways or investing in the city centre. So we're already seeing that, and I think mass transit is likely to have a kind of a construction impact, but then it's also going to have a benefit for kind of a 60-year period, isn't it? It's going to have a longer time frame of benefit, where a little bit of short-term pain can be kind of looked to come against the longer term picture of the benefits it will bring in terms of widening labour markets, helping to address the climate emergency and the like. So, but I know that a number of schemes in other cities have looked at business support measures. So how can you support the businesses in the locality around the investment to kind of maximise their support, particularly for the construction period? And that's something which we haven't yet got into the detail of, but there's definitely the opportunity to do that. And then the questions around Birmingham Tufts and Richmond Hill, I think that's something where we probably need to come back to when we get into more detail of the work, to be honest, particularly when we're looking at how do we best serve mass transit in East Leeds. that's an area which we're really keen to explore. And the vision document we published for mass transit talks around the individual communities and how it could then integrate with the wider rail offer in East Leeds, and how mass transit serves a different purpose and connects different communities to those in East Leeds. There's a kind of quick summary of some of the answers. I hope that's helped, and I'm more than happy to pick up further any of those questions and also pick up any other questions.
Does anyone want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, can I come back, Peter?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Well, I disagree, Tom. I don't think you've given enough weight to the issue, and it's okay to say, oh well, I'll come back when we're into another. We've been in this situation for the last 30 years, to my knowledge, of not having an adequate bus, rail, or mass transit service that is connecting the communities of inner city East Leeds to the economic developments and the health issues that serve these communities. So I think we need some better answers on this.
Certainly, and from a bus perspective, and we do this with the mass transit workers, we really highlight the importance of connecting the inner city areas of the region to the city centre, but also the wider Leeds area. So I think the reason I'm saying come back to it is because I quite like to kind of spend a good bit of time just going through the plans with a bit more detail of what they mean for East Leeds, Councillor, more than anything else. I think there's a lot of material there, but I'd actually just like to explain them more to you in a kind of more of a one-to-one forum with you.
Lovely, great. We'll look forward to that.
Thanks. Did you want to come back, Councillor Robinson? Yep.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I'll lower my hand as well. Thanks for the answer, Tom. It was just to clarify. I think it would be really useful to know if routes are not going to be able to support a form of transport, that we're clear on what that means and what the cost will be. If it's just economically unviable to have light rail going somewhere, it would be useful to know. At the moment, the plan seems very aspirational, and we're making the decisions and seeking feedback. I'm keen to drill down into the detail. And you mentioned the high demand corridors. Is that a suggestion around a congestion charge on those high demand corridors? And I will also take you up on the one-to-one you're giving to Councillor Reagan.
Absolutely. So at the moment, we don't make any kind of views around congestion charge or anything else. We talk about highway demand management measures. Absolutely no decisions or any kind of development work has gone on in that space. We're just opening the conversation around, as a region, we need to reduce the number of trips which are going on to address the climate emergency. There are policy measures which we could take as a region, but it's got to be something which works for the region as a whole. And we really want to make sure that we are kind of rejuvenating our towns and city centres post-COVID, don't we? So it's how can we do that at the same time? So there's a really big policy space in there about what you could do, and that's something which different authorities will have different views on how we can move that space forwards. And that's something which is at such an early stage at the moment. Helen, do you want to come in on that point as well?
Yes, please. Thank you. I was just going to really pick up on the East Leeds point from before, which was more kind of around the fact that we are launching a demand service, which will pick up some of the areas.
You're breaking up, Helen.
Oh, sorry. Sorry if my sound isn't so good. We will be looking at some demand responsive transport routes in the east of Leeds, which we are looking to kind of try and bring into Richmond Hill and that area into Leeds. Also, as we go through, and as you know, we're working towards developing an enhanced partnership with our bus operators, which means we will be working more closely with the operators to look at the network exactly. So therefore, the role of the bus network within the east of Leeds will be looked at as part of that as well. Okay.
Thanks for those, and yeah, I think we'll be I'm hearing from officers then that they'll be happy to give briefings to areas. What we'll say is there's a lot of areas in Leeds, so it may be that it's easier to tie up a couple of wards together or similar in order to give the best information. But we'll look at that, and obviously there'll be particular areas that are well connected together, shall we say. Next set of questions, I've got Councillor Buckley, Councillor Forsyth, and then Councillor Harrington, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's very helpful. I just had a couple of things. Well, I could ask 3 or 4 things actually, but I'll limit myself to 2 questions if I can. And the first one was that we've had a lot of work, and the map on mass transit shows a straight line up more or less the A61 to Old Woodley. And there's a lot of work either being carried out or will be carried out on bus lanes. And further to that, I think you've referred, Tom, to government help in order to create more bus lanes and more infrastructure for buses. And it's been in the paper in the last few days. But taking the A61 as an example, if and when all this infrastructure is put there in order to serve the buses, what happens when a mass transit system comes along? That presumably will all have to be taken out, because already half the traffic lanes will have gone, 2 lanes down to 1. So obviously that needs to be, you can't have a mass transit presumably and a bus on the same lane, on the same road. So perhaps you could just clear that up. And then secondly, a broader point really, we've heard about the £4.5 billion government fund into which cities have to bid or regions have to bid. But in the documents, it states that this entire mass transit system could cost up to £70 billion spread over 30 years. So what kind of long-term guarantees have been given that this will be actually available? You know, it's all right talking about a fantastic system, and we all want that, but in the end of it, at the end of the day, who's going to actually pay for the damn thing? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Neil. We'll take them in a round of 3. So, Councillor Forsyth.
Right. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Tom, for your very your comprehensive presentation to us. I've got 3 specific things to ask about, really. My first thing is that West Yorkshire Combined Authority has got their target for their climate emergency is 2038. Leeds, it's 2030. So are these plans addressing getting West Yorkshire Combined Authority to net zero by 2038, and how does that align with what Leeds needs to do? That's the first thing. Slightly related is you talk about, in terms of the mass transit, you talk about construction impact. Will one of the criteria for looking at that be the carbon accounting in actually constructing something? So the difference, obviously the different options will have a different impact on what carbon is released, etc. So that's the second question. And the third one really is, do your plans have any, are they looking at reopening old lines? I, as Councillor for Farley and Wortley, am wondering about the Wortley curve. So if you could update on that as well. Can I say that I was really pleased to hear you say about policy measures for the region to address the climate emergency. So that was quite encouraging. You spoke of earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back slightly, Tom. We didn't really address the issues of the outer northeast and how we can support the nighttime economy in Leeds, how we link into York and Harrogate for healthcare issues and for work and employment. And with the massive building numbers that are going to be going on in the whole of the outer northeast area, there are huge numbers of people who are going to need to be able to access employment. And there's just nothing, that we just disappear off the edge of the map. On an old-fashioned map, it would say, there be dragons here, because we've just fallen off the edge of it. It's like being in the Flat Earth Society. So I would like, actually, as chair of the Outer North East Community Committee, to suggest that you maybe come along to one of our community committee meetings where you would be able to speak to Harewood, Wetherby and all Woodley Ward members all at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Tom, do you want to take those three? And
yes.
Helen, did you want to come in as well on
just to
one of those?
On Paul as well, I might ask him to come in, particularly on some of the points around the Leeds climate emergency 2030 target, and also the Wetherby Outer North East Committee as well. So I might just come back to Leeds, and Helen, if you've got any points on those in the mail, to come back to those as well. But just starting from the top in terms of Councillor Buckley and the All Woodley point. So yeah, absolutely. The plans identify in the mass transit vision the opportunity to connect kind of areas from Leeds City Centre towards All Woodley by mass transit. The vision document also identifies the opportunity for mass transit integrating with mass transit rather than competing against it. And what does that mean? Well, what does that mean? Well, if mass transit is a light rail solution, it means that the mass transit and bus services could both use exactly the same infrastructure. So in the world of, I'll go back in time, in the world of NGT was entirely separate from the local bus services. So you had bus stops for the same places in different places, one served by NGT, one served by a bus. And that's in effect what we want to try and avoid. So in effect, you create an integrated hub which is served by both the mass transit solution and the bus solution in one place to make it as seamless and easy for passengers to travel. But also it goes beyond that, beyond the physical and actually in terms of how it operates. So you'd have a single fare could travel on both the mass transit solution and the bus solution. So actually from a passenger perspective, they have a choice. But also, as part of that, we'd want to look at how the services would work on particularly on buses. So the best example of this, I'm not proposing we do exactly the same as this, but the best example of this is Metro in the 1970s and early 80s. When the Metro in the Northeast was introduced, the bus services were completely reviewed. And they said, well, actually, if we're building a major piece of kit with significant public funds, as we're potentially looking at here, then surely we want to look at how the bus services feed and integrate and serve that network rather than compete against it. So rather than having bus and light rail, for example, on exactly the same corridor doing exactly the same thing, you have the bus services from the local communities coming to your hub, and then from your hub, your mass transit goes down the main corridor. So that's the type of model which we could move to. And that's all part of the conversation in the spaces. Could you look at doing something entirely different with your bus services in the future so that they actually are coordinated with your mass transit rather than duplicating it? Because I think there's a huge amount of benefit we can get into in that space, isn't there? In terms of the actual route, as we said, we haven't decided on particular routes at all at this point, and it's more Councillor Buckley and your residents. Do you agree that mass transit should be coming to All Woodley? And is that something which you support? That's basically what we're looking for at this stage. And the next point is, well, actually, what does this mean for Woodley? What are the choices around route options? Do we have it as a single, do we have it going down a central reservation, or do we have it on a bus lane, or how does it work? That's to go into, but we're not there yet, and we need to do further work to get there. And there's no point us doing that further work if there's not, in principle, support for looking at it. So in terms of who's going to pay for it, that was your other question. You're right. I talked around the £4.2 billion fund, which the government has announced as part of the budget, or re-announced as part of the budget, which mayoral areas will be able to share. We haven't yet heard any official guidance on how we can share it. So we're still waiting from the DfT and Treasury around a letter or some guidance to set out how that money is going to be used. So that's to come. We're expecting it imminently. It's just not made its way out of central government's doors yet. But that £4.2 billion fund is not going to be enough to deliver the whole ambition within the vision document. That's a longer term programme, which is going to take more funding to enable it to be delivered. It's worth noting that the £4.2 billion fund will have to be shared between 8 mayoral areas. So we will only get a proportion of that. We'll be one of the biggest mayoral areas so we'll get a decent share out of it, but we won't necessarily get all of it. So there will need to be other funding streams to come forward. We're looking at private sector funding opportunities as well. So how could you use such things as pension funds or private financing arrangements to help support that as well? But what is absolutely key is we've got to have a first phase which is deliverable and really move Leeds and West Yorkshire forward from being in the position of having no mass transit system and being the largest city region in Europe with no mass transit system to having a system which is deliverable and ready and can be kind of made, become an exemplar of how to do mass transit in the UK. So hopefully that addresses some of your questions, but we can come back to it if you want to, and also welcome to have any follow-up conversations. In terms of the climate emergency, I think it is a really fair point that there are two different dates around West Yorkshire 2038 and Leeds in 2030. From a carbon impacting, I'll bring Paul in a second on that. I think all projects need to be assessed, don't they, from a carbon impact rather than just mass transit. It's not unfair to do it to one project and not to all. So it needs to be a commonality across the piece. And that's something which I know we're keen to look at, how we do that. But we also need to reflect all of the priorities. So the economic, the strategic, the financial, the economic implications, and look at these in the round, and carbon being part of that, looking at it in the round. So that's my perspective, is we need to understand it, we need to take account of it, but maybe the decision on whether to do it isn't just based on that. In terms of the other point made about reopening old rail lines, again, that's something which we're not yet into, and it comes back to the point I made around Councillor Buckley's question. If we agree that Woodley or Pudsey or to the east of Leeds need to be connected by mass transit, well, there are various route options you could then get into around how you could connect them. And that's at the stage then, well, there might be choices and compromises and on options around using disused infrastructure versus using existing infrastructure or doing something different. So that's, we need to get into that. And as councillors, there need to be options and pros and cons of those options and choices made, but we're not ready to make those choices yet because we're still at the in principle stage. But absolutely, we wouldn't want to come forward with just saying, and the solution is X on a particular disused alignment. It's too early to jump just yet. And in terms of the outer northeast, yeah, more than happy to come along to the groups and have that conversation. But is it okay if I bring in Paul at this point and then Helen? Paul, is there anything you want to say, particularly on the climate emergency or the Wetherby point?
Well, I was going to say, I think I'm coming to the community committee next Monday to discuss the connecting Leeds transport strategy. So I could share that time with Tom if members wanted that for that. In terms of the climate emergency date, I think I've been asked this question a number of times, and I think there's a point around if Leeds reaches net zero by 2030, then it's going to lead the way and help the rest of West Yorkshire get to that 2038 target. I think the aspirations are the same. The fact that the timelines are different do make it slightly challenging for us in Leeds to achieve that 2030. But I think, you know, we'll be pushing to bring others along and accelerate their programs as well. So I think there's an opportunity in that. I think that is that what you're asking about?
And Helen, was there anything from Helen from you on the bus side?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of points just to pick up there on the, so in terms of, I guess, from a bus perspective, we are always looking into options to bring in funding for low emission or zero emission buses, and you'll notice that Sturton Park and Ride, we've first we'll be operating electric buses on that route. The demand responsive transport service that I mentioned earlier, that will be an all electric operation. And through, you may or may not have seen through the National Bus Strategy this morning, but there will also be funding there for which we can bid into for zero emission buses, which we will be looking to understand, subject to the parameters of that fund, but we will be looking to understand what we can, if there is, you know, opportunities through there. So we are, and through the enhanced partnership, we are working with operators to understand how we can really maximize these opportunities to kind of bring in low emission or zero emission buses, or continue funding for retrofit to Euro 6 or new Euro 6 buses. So we are exploring all options on that front. Just on the outer northeast points, so the bus network review, which was part of the connectivity strategy engagement pack, looked at development opportunities. It was based upon development across each district in West Yorkshire. So what development was put forward to us at the time of writing, and this was back in, it should be noted that that work was done back in 2018. So obviously things have changed a bit since then in terms of development that was in there. And what that looked to then do was understand what capacity would be needed on the core bus network to manage that future demand. And that's therefore looked at kind of, we've been using that pre-COVID obviously, but we were using that with the operators to understand what opportunities we could do to kind of bring more capacity in to meet the demands that we were highlighting in that network review. So the outer northeast was obviously part of that in that conversation. The work was completed February last year, and then we had COVID. We have, however, through the work we're going to be doing this year through the enhanced partnership, we will be revisiting that work to understand kind of where are we now with the bus network on a wider basis, not just the core network. So that will then bring us opportunities to understand what connections we think we need going forward, and what connections we have, we don't have, etc. So that's helpful.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, did you want to come back in, Neil? Do you want to come back on that?
It was just briefly, Chair, just to say to Tom that I hereby confirm that we would like your Woodley to be linked to the mass transit network, please. Not least because by the time it all gets built, if it goes wrong, I'll have gone long to the bus shelter in the sky. But just to make another brief point, if I can, just on the buses and reconfiguring the buses and so on, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because whereas up to now you've had buses on main routes taking loads of passengers and so on and so forth, being almost conventional profit-seeking companies. What this seems to suggest is that in the future, under this plan, there will be little feeder operations. And there will be, it seems to me, more dependent on a social model and would therefore need a subsidy. And of course, that has to come from somewhere as well. Thank you.
So, yes, thank you. So, so basically, going forward, an enhanced partnership has a greater level of risk sharing, if I call it that, between the combined authority and the operators. So the way we manage the network becomes slightly different. We obviously already have our tendered services, and they are, our socially necessary services. But this is about kind of understand how we can maximise funding across the bus network. So our commercial routes versus those routes that support that commercial network, and how we can better get that integration across the piece.
Just like to add that that's an absolute cracking question, Councillor Buckley, because it does start to get into the spaces we haven't got into before, doesn't it, in terms of what it means for the bus services and that integration between them. But that's part of the role of mass transit, is to start to kind of make us rethink how we do things moving forwards, and look to join things up in a way which maybe will work better for passengers moving forward. So we don't set out how we're going to do that in the plans. It's more the principal point again is that the space we should be getting into is what the vision documents are starting to ask, and testing whether we should be getting into these spaces is something which I'm not sure we've done enough of to date.
And that's exactly why the integration between mass transit and bus is really important, because it's that working together that means that we can actually maximise the public transport opportunities across a greater area.
There's absolutely no point in building a mass transit solution which just competes against a bus solution, is there? Because actually that's not for the benefit of anyone. It just creates kind of confusion and lack of clarity to passengers about what they should be doing.
Exactly, and it also needs worth remembering that bus is a form of mass transit.
Yeah.
So it's a case of kind of how we therefore utilise the bus in that picture as well.
I'll come in. Thank you. I'll bring the next couple of people in. I've only got a couple in this, so I've got in the order I think I saw them go up was Councillor Smith and then Councillor David Blackburn. So Trish, yeah, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been listening, obviously, and you know, whilst I don't want to hammer any points home specifically regarding Pudsey, it seems to me that the point I made regarding Pudsey is vital for the rest of the city. We have main corridors and very little else feeding off them. Now, I fear, looking at the costs involved, the time involved, and almost the ease, we're going to end up with a mass transport system linking directly through Leeds and Bradford. Now that's going to cut out an awful lot of the district centres, and it's going to leave an awful lot of residents almost stranded. When, you know, I feel that by looking at it in a joint, well, to use your term, Tom, a more joined up way, we could offer a much better solution. 1967, Pudsey had all 3 railway stations closed down. They opened up one new one, which was at the time an intercity station. It was the great saviour and the be all and the end all. Most of our residents can't get there. At the moment, we're busy putting in cycling and walking routes to link the station. How does that help mum with 2 kids or an elderly person trying to get there? You know, how do we actually get there? How do we use that? And I think now is the time when we need to really start thinking about these things, not just say this is a broad brush solution. We need to actually get into the nitty-gritty at this stage before it's too late. We're already making massive changes along Armley Road. We're making massive changes all the way along the hedgerow. So if we do have a mass transit system, where's it actually going to go? We've got cycle lanes on roads that were already narrow that are further narrowed. Where is a mass transit going to go? If we don't start making the decisions now, then we won't have a decision to make, because we'll have to basically go back to the start and end up with nothing again. So we're spending to spend again. And I just think that, you know, we really do need to stop and think about what we're doing before we waste any more time, any more resources, any more money, and just constantly dig up roads, which is, you know, causing problems on already busy roads. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Trish. We'll take David, your question as well, and then we'll come back to all of them.
Thank you, Peter. I've got 2 questions. Firstly, it's about the consultation on this. Quite honestly, the best people to ask about public transport are the people that use it all the time. While I realise at the moment a lot of us are stuck in our houses and have been for most of the last 12 months not using it, what efforts have been made to actually connect with people who haven't got any other choice but to use public transport, i.e. they haven't got a car, you know? And I'll just give an example one. So many years ago when I sat on Metro, and we did a consultation about public transport, about buses in Leeds, and it was a set of people who were stood outside Leeds City Station talking to people that were coming off of trains who don't use buses in Leeds. And basically, as I say, what's wrong with our public transport system? And you ask anybody that regularly uses a bus, they'll tell you. And the second point is to do with a rapid transit. Back, what would it be, 30 odd years ago, 1970s, when county council first came into the old county council first came into operation, there was a plan for a rapid transit system. That rapid transit system used a lot of the capacity, a lot of the disused capacity that was left over with the beach enclosures. Unfortunately, after 4 years, there was a change of control of the county council, and that was lost and didn't go ahead. And ever since then, we keep coming up with schemes to do things that tend to be on wire or something like that. And we forgot about that there's still infrastructure there. Every year that goes by, we lose more and more of that infrastructure. But this, as my ward colleague says, there's a Wortley curve that used to be the link up with the Bradford line, where London trains used to split at Wakefield, and half a train used to come around there and go into Bradford, what was Bradford Exchange Station at that time. There's areas like that. And, you know, I mean, what Trish Mish were on about with Pudsey, if we'd have done what we were going to do in 1970s, we'd have had a line through that went through the centre of Pudsey and out came out at Leicesterdike. But as I say, we haven't done it. Even when we've been planning, we haven't sort of safeguarded those pieces of infrastructure. Now, if we don't do something now, because we are talking a long term here for any kind of rapid transport, it's not going to be done in 5 minutes. So what we've got to do is we've got to do something to safeguard that infrastructure. So what are we doing about that?
I'll come back on those if that's okay.
Thanks. Yeah, if you take those two, Con.
So, Smith on Pudsey, point you towards, you know, if it's okay, I might just share the screen quickly, just to bring up the vision document which we've published on the mass transit vision document, which talks particularly to Pudsey. Hopefully, you're seeing on your screen the vision document and a page on Leeds Bradford. Can someone nod? Yeah. So in the document, what we've done is we've highlighted. We've done a dive into each corridor. So every corridor in the vision document, where we said there's an opportunity for transit. So you've got this overview map which shows the different corridors, and then they're color coded. And the colors are just to help with the wayfinding into the individual document. So we've got a section here on East Leeds, which talks around those kind of the growth areas and the kind of key places to connect, and it highlights them in a map here. And then on the next few pages, it then gets into the Leeds Bradford corridor as well. I think I passed it. I'll just bring it up onto the screen. There we go, Bradford to Leeds corridor. The most important thing on the Bradford to Leeds corridor is it's about connecting the communities along that corridor. And if we don't manage to connect the communities along that corridor, we've kind of entirely missed it. So it's not just about, mass transit isn't just connecting Leeds to Bradford, it's connecting the communities of Leeds and Bradford together on that corridor into the economic centres. And so for me, that's why that tube map's really important, is that we start to say, well, where are those communities? And then how does it work in terms of its relationship with the rail offer? And for me, Pudsey is a great place where there's a huge opportunity to better connect the communities of Pudsey and the surrounding areas better, because the rail line simply doesn't serve many of the communities through that space. We've got a real opportunity to do a much better job than has happened before, and really have a joined up conversation around where do we want to connect within these areas, and then to test different route options. Well, this route option might serve these areas really well, and these might compromise other areas, and working through with you what the implications and options are, and the compromises which come along with different options as well, because no option is going to be absolutely perfect. So we just need to kind of test pros and cons of different route options with you as the next stage. But Pudsey is absolutely front and centre our thinking of a key place to connect as part of the Bradford Leeds corridor. And then, as I was saying earlier, buses continuing to be very important in that corridor, but potentially recast to feed and integrate to mass transit rather than duplicate. And rail will continue to also be important on that corridor, serving the Calder Valley community off towards Halifax and the like, but potentially using that service differently from what it's been used today. So there's a real opportunity there for us to do something different. And then to come back to Councillor Blackburn, wasn't it? Councillor Blackburn's points he was making. Yeah. Councillor Blackburn, what are we doing about route safeguarding? The whole purpose of this work is to help us to route safeguard. Absolutely. One of the key purposes of this work is so that when future local plans come forwards, there is, when someone says, why don't we safeguard this route, there's a clear strategic rationale for why we want to safeguard a route. So actually, yes, the West Yorkshire mass transit work is moving forwards. These are the places which we want to connect. Therefore, we're looking at safeguarding particular route alignments for these spaces. I can't kind of look back into the past of what should have been done 30 years ago. But we are where we are now, and the plan we've got here starts to address some of those challenges which maybe should have been addressed over the last 30 years. And at least it's the first time as a region we've got a vision for how to connect all of the areas, potentially by transit, across West Yorkshire, and that having that kind of partnership approach across the region, which is probably why some of the schemes in the past haven't managed to come forward quickly enough, or turn from development into delivery, because they didn't have that region-wide support beyond Leeds. And I think that's a really important differentiator from this work to the past. In terms of engagement, there was also a question about engaging with bus users. Absolutely, we're pushing this out via Metro bus users as much as possible, because you're absolutely right, bus users are some of the key people who need to tell us what's wrong with the buses or what's right with the buses at the moment, and how can that shape our plans moving forward. But we also need to get people out of the car. So actually we need to understand car users' perspectives of this work as well. So what would it take to get a car driver out of their car and using mass transit instead, or bus instead? So that's a really big challenge and a big tough ask. But for the resident who currently drives their BMW into Leeds every day and parks up in the city centre, what does it take to get that person out of their BMW and onto sustainable modes instead? And those are the types of people we need to be targeting, as well as bus users.
And if I could just add to that, if I may, Tom, on that last point. So Transport Focus are part of our West Yorkshire Bus Alliance, and they are frequently given us soundings on a national basis, albeit, but kind of what how we should be looking at the bus offer for across the piece. And we are trying to increase our engagement with Bus Users UK as well. And both Transport Focus and Bus Users UK will be participating in the panel discussion as part of this engagement webinar 2 weeks today.
Thanks for that. I don't know if anyone wants to come back on any of those. I haven't seen any new hands go up. So what I was going to do though maybe is ask Tom and Helen if they could. We've had some really good questions there. I think we'll have some conversations about which ones we need to follow up on and come back, obviously, in terms of those specific communities or the other points. But would you be able to just remind us of, maybe put that end slide up again, Tom, if you can, around those webinars, if people want to see more, and then around the further consultation that we've got and how people can submit their comments if they wish to, because I think there'll be people that something occurs to them obviously just after this, or that want to talk more about a specific route, and we do really want to make sure we get all of those.
Certainly, Chair. And just to say thank you to all the really good questions you've had today. It's really appreciated. And if people do want to explore any of the material further, to get in contact with us. And I think some of the conversations are probably better on a one-to-one basis anyway, to be honest, and we can spend a bit more time delving into what they mean for more local matters or from your particular perspective. So I'm more than happy to do that. So if you do want to get in contact, just come through Democratic Services or come through Councillor Groves or through the Chair, and we will arrange to have that conversation. In terms of the webinars coming up, hopefully they're on the screen. We've got the rail one on the 22nd, walking and cycling on the 23rd, bus on the 29th, a transport decarbonisation one, probably in the same window. We're just confirming the date. And then there was a mass transit one on the 5th of March, where the video's here, and there is a further one coming up. And the engagement's currently running until the 11th of April. So responses by the 11th of April. And we could really do with your help to get as many responses to this as possible. So anything you guys can do to help push out the messages to your communities would be really helpful in terms of maximising the number of responses we get back. We do on the survey page just have an interactive map where people can put in their views on anything to do with transport. So if they don't want to do a survey and they just want to do the interactive map, that's absolutely fine. We welcome any feedback on the plans in any forum.
Thanks, Tom. I think that's really useful. So I haven't seen any other questions come up or anything. So I think we're 2 minutes ahead of schedule, which is always great. This is our last meeting of this year for the District Consultation Subcommittee. So we'll obviously the membership that chairship and all the other roles get looked at in the AGM. So very much hope to see you all in the first meeting of the next year. But the date will therefore be shared after this meeting. And Les has put a reminder there about his printable copy to make sure he can go in. So yeah, I will follow that up, Les, and do give us a kick if you haven't had one in time. More than happy to. And I'll have that conversation around seeing some of these areas around the community committees and such to take a deeper dive into local areas, because I think that's really valuable. So thank you everyone, thanks for coming today and giving your views. Do share your views online, and I think that's the end of the meeting then.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.